whatever. But today, I enlighten you with my friend Wayne White and his wife Mimi Pond, who's back there, who's a terrific cartoonist, graphic novelist, and maybe you'll learn more about her too. But on this screen, you'll see the name Wayne White on the screen. It will show you. That is Wayne. Now, Wayne White is a friend of mine that I met at MTSU about 50 or 60 years ago. And I saw him in my drawing class. And I said, wow, who is this guy who can draw so well? And he came from the sticks, and he has this encyclopedic knowledge, and he's just wild and crazy and ready to share himself with the world. And we did these self-portraits in drawing class, and my self-portrait was, I was like in a tree trunk and sitting there in the tree as a tree trunk. And Wayne did this crazy self-portrait, a full body mark out with his hands stretched, and he had created this clear plexiglass panel with ink splattering on it, and it was a full cutout body. And it sort of was like us in general. And so I have been becoming more tree-oriented, and Wayne has taken his energy into the world, and he brings it to share with you. I would go into all the things he's done, but he's going to share that with you. And he's also sharing himself in my classrooms these 3 days, helping them to build big head puppets. And hopefully we'll make these crazy things into a lovely Webb Arts Parade at the Webb Craft Fair this next weekend, and march around and have some hoopty with them. Now, I could say more about Wayne, but I want him to have all this time to talk about himself and the things that he has done in the past 60 years. So, without any further ado and any further unpreparation, I want y'all to get ready, get energized for the fantastic, crazy, wild Wayne White! There's your thing.
Hey, Webb School. It's good to be here. My name is Wayne White, and what can I tell you? I make pictures. Sometimes I make moving pictures like this one. That's 28-year-old Lyndon Johnson in the hill country of Texas, running for Congress in 1938. And then sometimes I make pictures on the side of a building, big words. This is down in Miami, Florida. This says, "Beauty is embarrassing." Now, what do I mean by that? Tell you what, I'll tell you later. And sometimes I pour paint on a picture and let it dry, and I tell you what it looks like. Fried chicken. Now, where does all this hilarity begin? Well, for me, it begins in North Alabama on Sand Mountain. This is my daddy, Willis Wayne White, the last of the old-time country boys. Plowed corn and cotton fields with a mule, read Captain Marvel comic books by a kerosene lamp. He got in his mind he was going to marry the daughter of the richest man in town, Billie June Wilkes. And sure enough, they eloped 45 miles north to Chattanooga, Tennessee in 1950. Now, in 1950, Chattanooga was an industrial powerhouse. They called it the Dynamo of Dixie. And my daddy had no problem at all getting a job at the new DuPont nylon factory. 1954, my sister was born, and then 3 years later, I came along. I was born a puppet, and then later I went on to make my own puppets. Yeah, that's Randy. Yeah. I'm from Chattanooga. Chattanooga's made a whole industry out of its history and scenic beauty. Confederama, the Incline Railway. You could say this was my first idea of what art was, what the art world was. They took nature and history and beauty, and they put it in a room, and they lit it just so, and they charged you money for it. Isn't that what art is? Yeah, sort of. Also, one of my earliest memories is going to the grocery store with my mama, going down the aisles and looking at all the beautiful graphics on the grocery store shelves. This was the era of big, bold graphics. This is where I first fell in love with letters and typography. I loved letters before I could even read. And before I could even read, I thought of letters as different characters and stuff. They've always been alive. And then they became even more magic when I found out they could talk to you. So I love letters. And that's one of my earliest memories, of playing with letters, even though I couldn't even read. Now, I was a weird little kid. I had an imaginary playmate named G-Dar, and he looked just like Roger Maris of the New York Yankees. Somebody you have no idea who it is, so I don't know why I said that. But man, one of my favorite toys, though, the one that really blew my mind, and probably some of you are familiar with, the Viewmaster. Oh, man. This is one of my very earliest visual memories of looking through this thing. And behold, they took flat two-dimensional cartoon characters and created three-dimensional worlds that they lived in. Now, I had no idea that an artist had carefully staged this scene, made this model, and lit it just so. To me, that was the real life of Huckleberry Hound. This is what he really looked like, and this is what he was at home. And I yearned to be in that world. I think that's a thing that most artists share, are people with an artistic sensibility. They've glimpsed this beautiful fantasy world that they want to reach, that they want to live in, that they want to create in, but it's just out of reach. Just like Huckleberry Hound's world was just out of reach to me. And it's like that yearning to get to that beautiful place is something that motivates me still to this day. It all started with wanting to live in Huckleberry Hound's world. But no, I was living in Hickson, Tennessee world. The only place I was going to go was 4 or 5 days a week to the bowling alley with my daddy here, Willis White, who was an expert bowler. You might say I learned how to draw in a bowling alley. I couldn't run around. I had to sit there. So I brought a big old stack of paper and pencils, and I drew. I learned how to shut out all the noise and confusion around me so I could draw the perfect line. Just like my daddy was down there in the pit shutting out all the noise and confusion around him so he could bowl the perfect strike. What happened?
I plugged in the sound.
Oh, okay.
So it may fix it or it may have broken it.
Learning to draw, well,
Did I broke it?
it's on there. Oh, there we go. Learning to draw in a bowling alley toughens you up for this world. You know, I'm questioning and investigating stuff all the time over here in my studio. Hell, I've done it. I've tried it all. I've even been over the Gold Guy in Rockefeller Center in New York City. It says, you're supposed to act all impressed. You're not, though, are you? Huh. Loved comic books, like a lot of you probably do. Like most American kids, that was my first idea of art, and cartoonists were my first idea of artist. I especially loved Superman because I identified with him. I felt like I was so weird and crazy in rural Tennessee. I felt like I had been rocketed in from another planet. I started drawing cartoons for my junior high school newspaper. This is one of my silly first attempts to draw. This is where I first got addicted to my work being broadcast over a large group of people. You know, all 400 people in my junior high saw this. And I got addicted to having lots of people see my work. And I'm still on that road. And that's where that road began, right there in my junior high school newspaper. And then I started to discover other art, like Ralph Steadman. He was a big influence on me. I first saw him in Rolling Stone magazine. That's me in 1975, believe it or not. Just ready to leave Chattanooga, Tennessee, and go up to Middle Tennessee State University, where I majored in a very specific genre of my own called failed abstract paintings of the 70s. I learned to make lots of bad paintings. I was an abstract expressionist, you know? And even though I've made all these horrible, silly paintings like this, I learned a lot from abstract expressionism. I learned that art can't be just precious. You should work in a series, keep your energy going, do your thing. Even though you're not turning out the greatest art, you're learning how to loosen up and live in the moment, which is a very important lesson art teaches us. Of course, I kept my cartooning dreams alive with my etchings and etching class. I loved printmaking. And I loved art parties with Mr. Michael Quinn. This,
No, I'm just kidding. It's okay.
This is one of Mike's first art cars. I know you've seen his crazy car around campus. This is the very first one he did back in 1979. I learned a lot from my fellow students, especially Mike. My fellow students, and I think you'll find this true here at Webb, your fellow students are just as important or maybe even more important than your teachers in a way, because you learn from them too. You learn to compete, you learn to get along, you learn what your generation is thinking about, you learn to be a part of a group and know that you're not alone. And that's the great thing about a school like Webb. You can all strive forward together and inspire each other. And that's what MTSU and Michael Quinn did for me. Now, I graduated MTSU, and went to Nashville, where I discovered this incredible comic book, Raw magazine. It was bringing together the two things I love to do, abstract painting and comic books and storytelling. And by the time I was to the last page of this comic book, I knew I had to be a part of this world. I found out it was printed up in New York City. So I jumped into my 1970 green Ford Maverick, and I drove up to New York City, and I parked on 23rd Street, and I went into the School of Visual Arts, where I knew Art Spiegelman taught, who did Raw magazine, and I stalked him in the hallways. I found him. I said, "Hi, I'm Wayne White from Tennessee," and he thought I was the craziest thing in the world. But he let me sit in on his class. I found an apartment on West 4th Street, and a Tennessee hillbilly like me moved to New York City, you know. Anything can happen. And I watched him draw the award-winning Mouse comic book, which a lot of you might be familiar with. Mr. Quinn might have introduced you to that. Yeah, who would have thought a kid from Hickson, Tennessee would get to watch a Pulitzer Prize-winning graphic novel, the graphic novel that launched 1 million ships, be drawn. Of course, this was one of my creations at the time. And you'll remember Ronster the Monster. No? No? You don't remember Ronster? Oh, no, never mind. I did a lot of drawing and illustration. I started getting jobs on magazines. This was the last gasp of the golden age of magazines and such. And this is my illustration style. I met a beautiful young woman named Mimi Pond. She was already famous. She wrote this book called The Valley Girl's Guide to Life. Ask your mom and daddy about Valley Girls. It was a big phenomenon in the early 80s. She also wrote the first episode of a cartoon about some yellow-skinned people. I can't quite remember the name of it, but it'll come to me in a minute. She wrote first episode of that baby. And miracle of miracles, she married me. And we're still married, and we have 2 children, Woodrow and Lulu. And they're both artists. May God have mercy on their souls. Now, I think back to the 70s. That's where I started doing puppets with Crazy Mike Quinn here. I was influenced by this crazy puppet on Saturday Night Live called Mr. Bill that always got destroyed and beat up at the end. I loved that. I loved Andy Kaufman, who was deconstructing showbiz, getting up there and doing crazy things, but making it work on this weird level. And I loved punk rock music, deconstruction and destruction. Yeah, that was the era. That was in the air. I couldn't play guitar, so I picked up a puppet instead. And me and Mike Quinn and Jeff Wells, we started doing puppet shows in Nashville, Tennessee, around 79, 80. That's at the end of one of our shows with Mike in character there. Here's another show that me and Mr. Quinn did called Giant of the World. We did that in the backyard in Nashville, Tennessee in 1980. Here's some more shows that I did up in New York at house parties, Galaxy X. And about this time, I went back down to Nashville in 1985, and I got a job designing a kid show called Mrs. Kabobble's Caboose in Nashville, Tennessee in 1985. And some of you might have seen it. I think it's still on the air somewhere. in Kentucky or something. It's still running to this day. It's on the internet. There's Mr. Quinn as P.T. Pickens. This was my first professional job as a set designer and a puppet designer. So I took my Mrs. Kabobble, look at Mrs. Kabobble's caboose. I took my Mrs. Kabobble's caboose portfolio back up to New York City, and and they gave me a job on one of the greatest television shows in the history of mankind. It's our, it's Pee-wee's Playhouse, ladies and gentlemen. If you can see it. It's all right. Forget it. Forget it. Let's go. Can you take that off the screen?
Click this. Make this click.
What?
Make it.
Here.
Make
What?
It, make it.
What?
Make it do this. Make it do that. No,
what?
make it
No,
do
it's
that.
off. You do it.
Wait. Oh! Oh! Wait. Wait. Hey! Oh, wait! Ah!
All right. That's good. Anyway, thank you, Michael. 1986, they gave me a job on Pee-wee's Playhouse. And I've made it into the Viewmaster world. Pee-wee was a fantasy world I always wanted to create. And there I was. Maybe some of you have seen this. I know your parents have. That's me in 1986 with Pee-wee Herman. This is some of the stuff I designed on the show. Flory, Dirty Dog. I did a lot of the wall designs and floor designs. There's Randy, the puppet. There's the Beatnik guys, Dirty Dog, Chicky Baby, and Cool Cat. There's Conky the robot. And there's Paul Rubens himself, which I owe a very big debt of gratitude to. He gave me my first great job drawing, something I did ever since the bowling alley, and now I was at the big time working on a CBS show. That's me and that giant eyeball there, Roger the Monster. Just like that, I was plucked off the mean streets of New York, and I was a set designer and a puppet designer. Suddenly, I got jobs doing shows like Shining Time Station, Riders in the Sky, Beekman's World. But if you really want the glory, you got to do the rock videos. There's the Smashing Pumpkins, Offspring, She's Got Issues, and Peter Gabriel, Big Time video. I did the animation, set design, puppets and stuff on that. That's from 87 till about 97. That's the famous Smashing Pumpkins video, Tonight. These are the production paintings I did for the show. That's the spaceship for the Smashing Pumpkins video. That's the moon set. That's a job I did for the Henson Company. In Hollywood, not everything gets made. Sometimes it never does get made, but it's just a painting sometimes. And that's a painting I did for a show called Borgle, based on Daniel Pinkwater books. But sometimes painting is the star of the show. Keep your eye on this. This is an Old Spice commercial. Come on. Come on. Here we go. Here we go. Come on. This way. Here we go. There it is. Yeah. Sea serpent. Come on. Come on. Come on. Look at that baby. Look at that baby. Here on. Come on. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the world's longest schooner ship painting. 26 inches high and 60 feet long. Acrylic on canvas. I started painting again. I dropped painting when I moved to New York to be a cartoonist and a set designer and a puppeteer and stuff, but I started painting again about 1990. And I started thinking about Chattanooga and the history of Chattanooga, and how I loved history as a kid. I started painting these historical grand paintings, mostly about the Civil War, because I grew up in Chattanooga, and that's all you hear about, and that's all I used to love to play and fantasize about. This is called the Battle of Chattanooga, the Battle of Lookout Mountain, I'm sorry. This is called Snag Boat. This is all about early 90s. It's a snag boat that goes down the Mississippi River that pulls sunken trees out of the water. This is called George Washington's Dream. About this time, I started thinking about my love for typography and letters that I mentioned earlier. You know, one of my earliest memories as a kid, going to the grocery store. And I love the Rock City barns. I'm sure y'all have seen them around town, around the state at least. There's a lot of them between, I guess there's a few left. And I started dreaming about those big block letters against that beautiful green pastoral Tennessee landscape. I thought, yeah, I want to capture that in my art. You know, I want to get back to making big letters. So I was buying thrift store paintings for the frames so I could paint my historical scenes into them. I go, okay, I'm going to paint some big letters into this, and I need this frame. And I was about ready to kick out the cheap landscape reproduction in the frame to put in my own picture. I thought, what if I just painted on the cheap landscape reproduction? Save a lot of time, and bam! And I thought, oh, I'll try that. So I experimented, and my first word paintings were born. Here's one called All That Fake Laughing for Nothing. How many times have you said that, right? No, you never said it? Never mind. This one's called Nixon. This is about our old President Richard Nixon. This became a album cover for the band Lamb Chop. That was one of my first big exposures with my word paintings. And you might have seen that painting before. It's called The Old Mill Stream. And there's Nixon. And that became one of my first really famous paintings as far as the word paintings go. This was called You're Just Agreeing With Me, So I'll Shut Up. And I started experimenting with the typography more, using letters as buildings and sculptures and modern art in a weird kind of crazy way, really pushing the typography, making it into a big theme park. This is called Love Hurts. If you already don't know that, you will soon find out that in your travels through this vale of tears. This one's called Just a Picture, Shunned by Scholars. Now it costs $10,000. Some of you of a certain age will remember the Burma shave signs. That was inspired by that. And we got crazier and crazier with them. This one's called Organic Remains of a Former World, which is the name of a 1790 textbook on fossils. As you can see, I was getting really crazy with the typography. This is like a pachinko machine for your eyeballs. This one's called I Drove All Night, and I saw a giant snail with Hank Williams' head crossing the street. True story. Don't drive all night. And of course, the most expensive painting in the world. Now, after a while of doing my paintings, I thought, I want to get back to puppets, because I love puppets so much. So I decided to start traveling around the country and doing giant puppet workshops, much like I'm doing here at Webb. And one of the first places I stopped was the Watkins School of Art in Nashville, Tennessee. That's Sam Watkins there, the founder. That's a big old head. It's still at the Nashville Public Library, I think. You can visit it there if you're curious. And then I went to some other school in Tennessee. I can't remember the name. I'm kidding. I came here to Webb School in 2010. 10, yeah. And we built big old Sonny Webb himself. And you recognize right out here? That's where we first premiered him. That was a lot of fun. You can still visit Sonny over in the art department. He's hanging up over there. That was one of the first big walk-around puppets I did. We had a lot of fun with that. And he's made several appearances all over the country almost. Washington, D.C.
Vegan Puppet March.
So I'm really proud of making Big Sonny, and I'm really fascinated by Sonny Webb. I think he was a great man. I've read all the books on him, and it's a real honor to be here at his school. This is the Louvin Brothers. You probably don't heard of them, but they're a famous country music act. They're from Sand Mountain, the same place my parents are from. So I really identify with them. My grandmother knew them as kids. This is a big, two big puppets. That tallest one's about 16 feet tall, about the same height as Sonny. And I did it for a show in New York, and now they're permanently installed at the Country Music Hall of Fame in Nashville. This is a kind of a Picasso Cubist rodeo I did at the Oklahoma City Museum of Art in 2014. There's another look at it. You can see the Picasso influence there. I love Picasso, and I love abstract art, and I love cowboys and horses. Kind of brought them all together. This is an exhibit I did up in York, Pennsylvania called FOE, F-O-E. It was about the time the Confederates invaded Pennsylvania and captured this town for supplies. And I made these giant Confederate and Yankee soldier puppets. This guy pulls his boot on and off with a rope. I like interactive stuff. I like things that you can play with and push and pull and make come alive. That's why I love puppets and animation. Your drawings can come alive. You know, it's really exciting to see something go out in the world and move around. You know, it's like Frankenstein's monster, only with a better mood. There's another view of Foe up in York. That's the entrance. You enter through his legs. You know, he's a pay up. That's General Jubal Early. This is a parade I did in Shreveport, Louisiana, celebrating Louisiana culture in the city of Shreveport. That's a giant gator playing a fiddle. I built that on the top of a motorized golf cart, and that went down the road, sawing away. This is a giant cowboy puppet I did for a parade in Wichita, Kansas, for the Sundown Parade, because it's a big cowboy cattle drive town. I don't have a shot of it, but this horse actually poops cardboard poop. He goes down the road, boom, 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 and a guy comes along sweeping it up. Never thought a puppet would do that, did you? But one of the things I'm most proud of is in my own hometown in Chattanooga, Tennessee, from 2016 to 2017, I did a Chattanooga History Funhouse called Wayne-orama. And it was all about celebrating the history of Chattanooga, a place I love. This is Chief Dragon Canoe, who was one of the last Cherokee war chiefs who had his headquarters there in the bend of the Tennessee River where Chattanooga sits today. This was a local TV legend called Bob Brandy the Cowboy that I grew up watching on TV. That TV is about 20 foot tall, and you can pull a rope and make him wave. This is Gustavo Dudamel. I did this about a year ago this month. I did this for a parade in Los Angeles celebrating the 100th anniversary of the LA Philharmonic Orchestra. That's their current conductor, a classical music superstar, Gustavo Dudamel. Again, like Sawney, it's a giant walk-around puppet you can stroll down the street with. I love giants, and I love giant puppets. Who doesn't? And here's something I'm very proud of. It's called Big Electric Fan to Keep Me Cool While I Sleep. I did this down in Houston, Texas. Let's watch it being built. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the world's largest George Jones head. He's 25 feet tall, 14 feet long. You can open his mouth. It opens and closes. You go around the back of his head and peek in. There's a little tiny George Jones marionette dancing in a honky-tonk all night long and all day long. And it's called Big Electric Fan to keep me cool while I sleep. Because if you've ever been to Houston, Texas in the summer, that's the only way civilization is ever going to survive down there, with big electric fans. That was one of my first big puppet projects, and I'm really, really happy about that one. Now, I've been doing these paintings since 1875. That's a long time, boys and girls. And yeah, you know, it's hard making all that beauty. Beauty is embarrassing. That's right. I was going to tell you what that means. I forgot about that. Beauty is embarrassing. Well, it's the name of a movie that me and Mr. Quinn are in, that Webb School's in also. But where do I get that phrase from? Well, number one, it has three meanings for me. Number one, when we see something beautiful, truly beautiful, whether it's a newborn baby or a work of art or a sunset, we're caught off guard. Something hits us in the gut before we know it. Before we know it, maybe a tear's trickling down our eye. It really captures this kind of private emotion we don't want to show publicly. So beauty makes us vulnerable, and beauty makes us maybe show an emotion that we're kind of embarrassed about, you know. Nobody wants to cry in front of other people, but when something hits you like that, it does it. That's the power of beauty. Another meaning for me is beautiful people, models, supermodels, male or female, that just happen to win the cosmic lottery. They think they made themselves beautiful, but they didn't. So they walk around all proud of themselves. Oh, look at me, I'm beautiful. And you're kind of embarrassed for them, you know, because, you know, beauty has sort of made them kind of silly, you know. They're embarrassing human beings in a way. But the number one message that Beauty is Embarrassing has for me is artists are people who make beauty. That's pretty much the bottom line. But you can't go around saying that. Hello, I'm Wayne White. I make beauty, you know. That's embarrassing. So, you know, on that note, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, I owe you a big debt of gratitude because you let me stand up here today and show you all my beautiful things, and I didn't get embarrassed once. Thank you. My name's Wayne White. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. We have a gift for you.
Thank you.
With the Sony Webb biography in there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Webb School.